but the whole thing is the hero's journey is most people I think live their lives as a fool's journey, right? They kind of go through life happen. It's like life happening to them, and they might learn the lessons, they might not. I mean, obviously, in like a hero's journey, he does like right. He goes into the unknown world, he comes back, he's forever changed, and then like he kind of learns the lesson. But very much it's like the hero's journey is very much like life kind of just like happening to you. And this framework that Jacques came up with is the magician's journey, which is kind of going through the major arcana of the tarot in reverse.
Mhm.
And so and it's very interesting though, because we often, especially in like popular media, like we don't see the story of the magician. We don't see Gandalf's
Yeah.
story.
Michael Boothby is the funniest person I've ever known. He's one of the most intelligent people I've ever known. And that kind of says a lot. I know a lot of wicked smart people, but he's if anyone in my life deserves their own show or even like their own cartoon, that would be Michael Boothby.
I would love to be a cartoon.
You kind of already are, and in many ways. Like, I
I
mean,
think I think I think I would make a lot more sense as a cartoon.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It would just explain a lot.
Yeah.
Be easier to navigate with all those physics of, anvils and other sort of
Acme,
acme things. Like,
Acme tools.
Michael is a breathwork facilitator. He he studied under a teacher, Jacques Theron. Am I pronouncing that properly?
Yeah.
Um, where he created this oracle card deck, Jacques did, of the Olympians, this Greek mythology deck, uh, channeled it, like hand painted the art in it as well. Amazing stuff of the Titans, the primordial elementals, and the Olympians. And Michael does this amazing thing where he does this archetype reading where everyone is essentially one of the Olympians. And it's super fascinating. And I've seen a lot of Oracle cards, a lot of Oracle decks, a lot of type things, but this is super accurate. Like we all, there's like the Myers-Briggs, there's human design, which also Michael does, and we'll touch into that. Everyone has like archetypes and many different things, but this Olympian one, this Greek mythology one, is super fascinating. And you said it before. You said once you know someone's archetype, you kind of, or it's easier to kind of understand them, right?
Hmm.
Like we've been at festivals before where you're like, you did a reading for someone, you're like, oh, they're an Aries. I was like, oh, that's why they're kind of acting like a dick, but that's okay, right? I mean, no, none of them are bad.
I remember that kid too, because I had Demeter. I was like, Demeter, and he was like, "You mean Demeter?" And then I was like, "Okay, Aries." And then he kind of like flashed me this look. Was like, "Okay, yeah, okay."
But that's
This
the
makes
beautiful
sense.
thing is like, it's they're none of them are bad, but just like us, like these gods, just like us, they have good and bad days or imbalances. So each one
Mhm.
has an imbalance. Like, we know a couple Zeuses, amazing wisdom keepers who just know a lot and really wise and share amazing information. Some of them are really good with ladies. That's another Zeus.
Little
um,
slandering.
yeah, but the imbalances, they can become really judgmental. And so it's really fascinating. And then we have some friends who are like some Hades. I'm Apollo. Michael's an interesting one. We know someone else like this, but Michael's Dionysus and Hermes.
Yeah,
Twofer.
yeah,
Do you want to go into that?
sure. Yeah, I mean, I think most people know Dionysus as like just like the god of wine, but I think he's more like his affirmation is I expand my mind to redefine what is possible in the world. So I think he's more also those like ecstatic practices, whether, kind of like ecstatic dance or um I mean, back in the day, a lot of it was wine, but perhaps also mushrooms, psychedelic experiences. I think any of those are kind of in the realm of Dionysus. Again, balanced. I guess imbalanced Dionysus is kind of like the rock star who's like partying too much, or
Mystic.
again, that can also look like drug addiction as well. Whereas Hermes is the messenger of the gods. So he's the only Olympian that can go between Mount Olympus, the mortal realm, and then the underworld. And then Hermes is also the shepherd of souls for humans who've died. So he um, guides souls on that journey through the underworld. And so Jacques definitely identifies a lot with Hermes, with the work that he does. But Hermes is definitely, communication, also just like, merchant, like selling things, probably like a lot of like marketing and sales is very Hermes.
Mm.
Um,
Very business
Whereas,
oriented.
what's that?
Very business oriented.
Yeah, yeah, but very like very cunning, very witty, very good with words, good with language as well. Which was another for Jacques. Like Jacques speaks 7 languages, so that's it's always amazing whenever I've been at either like a retreat with him and he's like speaking English and then he's speaking Dutch to his assistant and then he's like singing in Spanish. It's like wow, that's so amazing.
Renaissance man.
Yeah,
Michael, you're
truly.
also very witty yourself, very sharp, I'll say.
Thank you.
I'm
Thank you.
impressed. Um, and then we also so we have a main archetype, and then we can call on helpers, right? So I would even say right now, especially based on doing this podcast, Hermes is someone I've
Love
actively,
that.
channeling or, working with for these kind of things because this is a very Hermes like
Oh
podcast.
yeah.
I'm bringing people up here to show what they have to like distribute, be a delta of knowledge and information so people can find and these people, these entrepreneurs, these light workers. It's very Hermes.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
we know. I mean, typically typically people are a single archetype, but of course, like you can kind of get into like there's two, and then we know another person. For those who know Reiki Rachel, Michael did a card read or did a archetype reading for her, and she ended up being just like you.
Which was, yeah, and I think that was a difficult one for me. But again, it's like looking in a mirror, and I never, you never want to be like, oh yeah, you're just like me or that. But it was hard. But as I was going through them all, I mean, her especially with the Hermes too. I mean, especially like being on YouTube, especially doing that consistently, right? Spreading this message of love and healing and light. Like I think that's very Hermes, but then also just the mystical part of it, the mystery is, I think it's very Dionysus.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And I know that was a without revealing much. I know that was kind of it was a challenging reading because typically you nail them. Like I've seen you do, you nail them
Yeah.
closer to instantly. But she's multidimensional, crazy. I mean,
I
in a
was
good way.
nervous. I was very nervous. 'Cause
She can
I,
she can be
I don't know.
intimidating in a good
I
way.
normally do these for my friends or people I meet, but I don't know. Rachel's kind of been this mythical figure in my life because you've always chatted about her, and so I was I hadn't really ever like kind of talked to her directly. Like we have produced like some silly songs,
Yeah.
you know, for you for her, but yeah. So I felt like I was like really on the spot. So.
She doesn't bite. Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Um,
Austin Powers.
and so there's your main archetype. There's a helper, and then we have a Titan that is associated with our sun sign. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're the astrological archetype, which that's where I like to start because everyone's usually pretty familiar with like their horoscope or their sun sign, their astrology. And so that's always a good jumping off point, because usually you start there, people will go and it'll kind of, oh, I see this, I see that. Especially, my favorite is when people come and they read like they read the balanced part and they're like, yeah, and then they go to the imbalanced and they're like, oof,
Yeah.
because it is, yeah, and I think again, this the mythology, the classical mythology deck is very much like its own system. So, it does like differ a little bit. Like whereas in traditional astrology, like your sun sign would be your personality. In the case of this system, the sun is more like it's more this is kind of like what's guiding you. Like I like to think of it, I try to think of life as like a story, like we're all living our own story and we are the main characters in our story. And so in every main character in a story has usually like a motivation
Hmm.
and like an internal, I mean, usually there's like an external motivation and internal, but I really feel like that's what the astrological archetype is in um for this system. It's kind of like here's like kind of what drives you. Whereas that Olympian is kind of like this is who you are, and then
Hmm.
that helper is, who you want to sit with to bring in. And that helper archetype is always changing.
Yeah.
Like right now I'm sitting with Demeter. I'm also Jacques on his website. He has you can sign up for he has an email list where he'll send you a card for every new moon and full moon. So I usually kind of use those to kind of like change out my helper. But it's crazy because I always find it to be like scary accurate.
Yeah.
But I find like because Demeter right now is um right, it's like that strong mothering energy, which is like I very much like felt that like we were at this festival a few weeks ago and like our other friend John came and I very much felt like, hey, like I felt like I was kind
Hmm.
of like make checking in to make sure he had a good time. And then with my girlfriend's kind of going through, she's like starting massage therapy school and stuff. So I'm trying to like make sure that like,
Hmm.
she has everything set. So it's funny. I'm like a 33-year-old guy. I'm like, I feel like a mom, I feel like a mom right now.
I love that.
Yeah, so but again, I think that's what's cool about this deck too, is like beyond just having just that main altar, if you will. It's just like going through and just like sitting with these cards, because especially the Olympians, it's like we all have all of these within us. Like really,
Hmm.
the archetypes are represent kind of like what Carl Jung called the collective unconscious.
Mm.
Which again, it's like you can kind of map those archetypes. Like, I'm not really making a lot of content anymore, but I did want to make a video or something about like mapping Jungian archetypes to uh to the Olympians, like
Mm. I love
because you
that
can see
idea.
like Zeus or even like the trickster is very like that's very Hermes. Hermes has that trickster energy. And obviously like there's other pantheons as well. Norse, Celtic, South American, there's pantheons all over the world. And what I love about this deck though is like most people are pretty familiar with the Greek gods, and I think we're seeing a lot of like resurgence in the Olympian gods as well. Like I just saw on like Netflix just released this new series where it's like I think like Jeff Goldblum plays Zeus, but it's like they're all like the gods, but in like modern times, which is
Hmm.
crazy because like I had that idea like a year ago. I'm like, what if I wrote a screenplay for, and then like, okay,
Yeah.
someone already did it. But I don't know the name of that, but I do think that there is. I think we're living in a time that is very confusing and very chaotic.
Hmm.
And it's very easy to kind of like, go online and get sucked into rabbit holes and this and that. And there's so much information coming from all different directions that even if we're trying to find more about ourselves, I think we can end up more confused because there's just so much and a lot of it's contradicting. So for me, it's like I'm very grateful that Jacques created the system because again, from a young age, Jacques has always been interested in mythology, and so this has kind of been like a lifelong passion of his. And even before he had this deck, I remember going to some of his retreats and like he had his own deck like with like these that wasn't like commercially available, but he
Hmm.
would always use those and give them to people and give the meanings and that deck is even more like I'm sure he's gonna keep working on this one because I know like the first retreat I went to, like the card I got was Orpheus, and like Orpheus isn't in this deck. So he has like his own that goes beyond even just like the Olympians, Titans, and the primordial gods. It even has like more of like the myths,
Mm.
like Hercules, Orpheus, like kind of these tragedies
I
and
would love to see that deck if he ever releases that. That
oh, I mean, I'm sure he's working on it. Like I'm sure he put a lot of effort into this, and
oh yeah.
he spends a lot of his time, traveling around the world doing breath work and retreats and all of that. But yeah, I would love, yeah, I would love to see that deck again as well. Like I think I've asked him, like, hey, can I get a copy of that?
Can
Just like
I
just for
can I get a little
me.
demo of that deck?
Yeah, yeah. Um, but just to finish that thought, it's just I think there is something like timeless about Greek mythology, right? Classical Greek
Yeah.
mythology. It's classic. And so even I don't like these gods and goddesses, like all the stories and stuff, like I don't think we don't have to take, they're not like literal, but it's just they encompass so much of humanity that like if you are someone who is like looking to be like, who am I, what am I supposed to be doing, it's like this is a great deck to have because you can find out. And especially like, yeah, I've been trained on this deck and how to use it in like a variety of different ways. I took a course with Shock last summer, and so I think most people have like somewhat of an idea of who they are, at least I would
Yeah.
hope. I mean, a lot of people perhaps these days don't because they're just either scrolling or their attention is going outside of themselves, that they don't ever bring that attention inward. Um, but it's just these can help just bring out um just to give a sense of awareness that okay, this is who I am, and okay, this is what I'm good at. Okay, these are also, the like I think that the imbalanced parts of these gods and goddesses are just as important.
Hmm.
Like even like I had a summer like 2 summers ago where I was like I just got fired from a job, and I was just kind of like being like really reckless and like drinking a lot and stuff. And I was like, I look back and I'm like, oh, that was totally imbalanced Dionysus. I was just
Hmm.
like fully in that because my life wasn't going well, and I was like going into this kind of more shadow side of this card. But I've also seen myself at like the highest expression. But that's the thing with the awareness of the highest expression and the lowest expression. We can just see where we're at, and we also it takes like the blame away too, because I think a lot of like modern society, especially like the modern medical system, is like when there's something wrong with us, we immediately go to like pathologizing people. You have this disorder, and
Hmm.
you need these pills, and it's um, like you might just be expressing like a part of yourself that's a little bit darker, and people we don't have the awareness of these archetypes
We s-
anymore.
we come from a false light society where we suppress the darkness and even like the true darkness,
Yeah,
like a beautiful aspect, of the wholeness of ourselves and just the universe in general.
right. And just like on that note, like in like I discovered human design in 2018, where
Mhm.
I was like I went to my first kind of like healing arts and music festival, and I was living in Chicago at the time, and it was in Indiana. It was called Breathe Festival, and this was kind of the first time I taught conscious comedy although it wasn't called conscious comedy yet, but that was kind of like my first iteration of it. And I remember going there, and I met this guy Jade, and he was like, "Have you heard of human design? I think it would really help." I was like, "No." And he was like, "Well, I discovered I'm a projector," and I was like, "I think you might be too." And then
Mhm.
I looked it up, and I was, and it's just like, oh wow, all of this information was really helpful, because also at that time I was also struggling and was like, oh, is there something wrong? Like I was really struggling with like depression, anxiety. I was like, am I bipolar? I don't know. And then it's like when you look into especially like human design, like if you look at a projector, especially like an emotional projector, the way that just like my body's like energetically designed and how I respond to things
Mhm.
is what like could easily be misconstrued in this society as bipolar disorder.
Yeah.
But then it makes me wonder, I'm like, how many people are out there and they're being diagnosed with these, whatever, whether it's bipolar, BPD, or like all this stuff, and then they're just immediately thrown on these very dangerous antipsychotics.
Yeah.
when it's really just like we live in a world that's like very generator. It's very like one type,
Yeah.
and you have to work and you have to do all this stuff, and just the structure of our world isn't designed for non-energy types like projectors or even some manifestors. I have a friend who's a manifester, and he's struggled so much, but he spent so much of his life working his way up the corporate ladder and burned out so hard. And
Hmm.
then now it's like, what do I do now? So, I wish we had a society that was a little more friendly or like open to like different ways of being, but unfortunately in this like whatever inverted matrix or just consumer capitalist system, it's like we're all just forced to work, and oh, you don't want to work, too bad. That's
Yeah.
the way it is. And it's like I wouldn't a more like a more conscious world, a more conscious society would meet people where they're at, and we don't. It's like it's very judge this society is very judgmental. It's
Hmm.
very like abusive and exploitative, and it's tough. I think it's tough. And I think you're also a projector, and you've also had to work in the system, and it's like I'm sure you can attest to that, of being like really burnt out and just, but you have to just keep going. And it's like projectors need a lot of rest, and
Yeah.
that's something, as like the older I've gotten, I'm 33 now, it's like rest has become very important to me. When I start to feel tired or burnt out, it's like I go and I don't shame myself. I used to shame myself for like, I gotta keep going, I gotta keep
Hmm.
going, and that would only make me more tired. So again, whether it's human design, whether it's astrology, whether it's the classical mythology deck, it's like these are just tools to help us become aware of ourselves. Because if you can be certain in who you are and what your mission is, number one, you're not going to be led astray by other people trying to tell you who you are. And
Yes.
this whole world will try to tell you who you are and sell a cheaper version of yourself back to yourself and
Mm.
all of that. But also it's just like there, once you know yourself, you're not confused anymore. You can just get on with it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I think that like that's really the true value of all of this. I think a lot of people, especially like I even myself, when I first got into human design, I was like, oh, and I was like super into it. I wanted to tell everyone about it, and it's good, but I was just excited because I was like, oh, this is like really validating and really affirming to me. But at the end of the day, it's like none of this is like hard and fast. It's not like, well, if you can't do this, you can't do that. It's just an experiment. And I have a big background as like an improviser too. So I try to approach my life as an improviser too, which is a constant experimentation. Oh, does this work? No. Okay, well, what if I try this? Oh, this works. Cool. Okay, I'll go this way,
Mm.
So constant trial and error, which is also in my human design, being a 1-3 profile. Um,
Doc, Doc, we're trying a lot of things here, Doc.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you touched on this briefly as we were just talking about human design. And my favorite thing, so I love the mythology archetype reading that you do, but this extra step that you do, which I did, and I highly recommend to anyone listening, like 100% recommendation, do this. Do this course that Michael does. It's called Rebirthing. It's 10 weeks, one session per week. Really commit to yourself. It combines breathwork, combines human design reading, which he was just kind of talking about as well, and the mythology. And
Hmm.
so it's a 10-week program. It's 10 weeks, and it goes over the 9 centers of the human design system. We have 9 centers in our, in our system of in the human design, and there are, for those that don't know human design, we have five. All of humanity at the moment is broken up into is it 5 archetypes?
Four, or is it five?
Let's
Hold on.
let's count. It's so
Well, there's
generators.
generators, manifesting generators, projectors, manifestors, and reflectors.
Yeah,
So yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Five.
Um, the majority of humanity up until this point has been generators, and a lot of our world, I mean, amazing, amazing, amazing people, but most of our world has been made for generators, and for other designs it's kind of harder to kind of fit that mold. But that's the beauty of that, things are shifting. Apparently projectors are the newest of the of the lineup. The first session is just an overview. gives you he pulls it. He has a program. He pulls up your chart. And he goes. You just got to know like all astrology. You know your birthday, and it would help to know the location and time specifically.
Yeah.
Um, so again, go to your mama to get your birth certificate if you don't if you don't know the specific time. Um, and then from 2 to 9 to go through each center start. He likes to start at the base, where the root is. It's different than the chakra system, and it goes all the way up to the crown. And Michael's actually gone a step further. He's combined each one of the 9 centers with an Olympian or two, and it's really really fascinating that. And then you'll like pull a card, and there it just was so strangely relevant for every single session. Like days before, something would happen in my life and my reality that was very relevant to the center or the Olympian that was pulled, or whatever card. Because I was pulling Titans, I was even pulling from the primordials as well, and it was just, I mean, there's one of those things where it's like creepily, synchronistic. Um, and it really gave a lot of insight to me, especially my design, all of that, and just the breath work. He took me through like shamanic breath work that was very, very intense. I'd go deep and just I would just see things from my past flashing from my eyes, and I would just feel maybe not immediate, but a resolution and a closing out of things. So
Hmm.
it very transformational. I would
Yeah.
say like very transformational. If you want to go, that's kind of my like
Good.
testimony here on on this podcast. But if you want to go into more of that for the kiddies at home.
The kitties. Yeah, sure. Yeah, so again, I'm in a year-long breathwork process with Jacques. So I'm an apprentice breath worker. And then so Jacques he trained under a woman in South Africa who trained under Leonard Orr, and Leonard Orr was the creator of rebirthing.
Wow.
Yeah, so and so a big part of this course too is like obviously, I've been working with clients and then also doing the trainings, and I have over 200 hours. I'm at 240 hours right now with clients. And so I finally feel like I'm starting to find my strikes. When I started, I wasn't using the human design, and then obviously a part of this program was like meeting with Shock and doing rebirthing with him, and then also kind of getting feedback. And that's what, because so a rebirthing session, for those who don't know, it's 2 hours long. And the first like kind of the first hour is like a diagnostic conversation. And again, is like, this isn't therapy. Like, I'm not a therapist, so it's like we're not really and this is kind of like the tricky part, but it's like the whole point is just to use that talking to bring stuff perhaps from the unconscious to the conscious, or just to get the client to focus on what they're struggling with, or blocks, or even trauma, just to kind of just talk about it. But the real, where the work happens is that second part. In the second hour, that's all breath work. And so the rebirthing breath, it's also called conscious connected breathing. And so again, it's just, so again, it's just breathing in and out, conscious, connected, right? We're not holding. And so just when you breathe in that way, especially for, like around 45 minutes, it's like that you kind of enter a trance state, and you can either, again, I mean, like you can attest to this, man. Every time is different. And every
Yeah.
time I've done a rebirthing session, it's very different. Sometimes you can experience like the tetany, where your
Mhm.
kind of hands kind of cramp up. You might experience like numbness in your face or extremities.
I did, yeah.
But it goes away, but it's just a part of the process, because we are introducing more oxygen into the system. But as you know, when I started this, I wasn't using the human design. But it's funny, because when I went to Bali, um, for the breathwork retreat back in February, like I ended up just in the free time, like doing human design readings for like everyone, and everyone was like
Love
really
that.
enjoyed it, because a lot of them were older too, and they weren't really familiar with it, and like, oh, this is really cool. And so as for as a part of the apprenticeship program, Jacques said early on, he's like, obviously, like, I'm giving you guys the tools, and like, you see how I facilitate. but make it your own and bring in either your own coaching, your own
Mm.
systems, to do that. Which I love that. I think everyone, whatever you're doing, whether it's healing arts or creative arts, it's like, obviously like study and learn, but make it your own, put your own
Yeah.
spin on. And for me, it's just I found human design to be very helpful. And so it was just like, I was doing a session with Shock and I was like, oh man, what if I, just to give myself structure, because I was in the beginning, especially being like the first time kind of doing this healing work, um, I was at first like kind of struggling with the talking part.
Yeah.
Because I find, especially with this work, most people are familiar just like with therapy, so they come in and they just kind of vent and they dump, and that's okay, but I think we want to kind of like focus it, and that's what I found the human design was really great for, even because we can go through all of the energy centers, and obviously just like bringing awareness to these energy centers to clients, but also just using each of them as a lens to just look through your life,
Mm.
like how does your life look through the root center, through that kind of like stability and like pressure?
Hmm.
How is your emotional life, right? That would be your solar plexus, or your heart center, your ego, your G center, which is like your identity. So and it's funny because I once I started introducing the human design, with like my first few clients, I found that it was like, oh, it's like I got a lot of positive feedback. They're like, oh, this feels a lot more focused. I know what to talk about. And just like you said too, it's like I this happened with you, but this happened with a few of my other first clients. It's like we would talk about or even without even talking about the energy center, like the client would start talking to me about something and it would just be
Hmm.
like so relevant to the
Yeah.
energy, and I'm like, wow, this is like we're doing something here. I can't really fully explain it, but just by bringing this awareness and like starting this process, and I think this is true about healing. Really, whatever the modality is that you're doing, but anytime a person comes and is like, I'm committing to healing, that's when the magic starts happening. That's when you
Mm.
start to feel those blocks lift and you start to experience either these miracles or magic. And again, it's hard to talk about this stuff because I can't really explain it, but I've experienced this in my own healing journey, and I'm sure like you have as well, and maybe
Mm.
people watching. And it's like there's really like no place for magic or miracles in the modern medical system. That is just like, here's your brain, and your brain is chemicals and it's an atom, and it's like there's no kind of
Very in a box, and it's already
right. It's
explained.
we're looking at boxes and we're looking at charts, but there's really no credence given to spirit, or to just like even how clients or patients feel emotionally.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'm always very careful. I'm always just trying to create a safe space for my
Mm.
clients to explore themselves and to express themselves. And again, if clients do have trauma, or hard stuff that they've been through, like to provide a space that's safe to release that. And to me, I found I never thought I would be a healer. I really didn't. I never thought I would be a breath worker. But this is like this opportunity came, and just the more that I've worked with people, I've found it to be the most rewarding work
Mm.
that I've done in my life, because I'm someone who has been in the medical system for mental health problems, and like I've seen how doctors don't care,
Mhm.
and all of these, you know. I don't know. I've just had these experiences, and I'm like, I don't want other people to feel this way. And I'm not a doctor. I am not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. But this breath work, to me, even before I became a breath worker, I'd been practicing for 3 or 4 years pretty consistently, and it's been a practice that's helped me find wholeness and healing, and to just have peace in my life.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, like what's the value of having peace every day and just knowing who you are, and you can just go and live your life and stop having, oh, is something wrong with me and this and that, and because if you go to doctors, a lot of they'll just give you a run. I'll go see this specialist, go see that specialist, and
Yeah.
you end up spending a lot of money, and at the end of it, you still don't know what's going on. You still
For
don't know, so
for a system
I
that has a lot of this stuff figured out and in a box, they'll just throw stuff at the wall,
oh yeah.
just see
Oh
what
yeah.
sticks. No, coming from the medical field myself, it's bananas.
It's totally nuts. So, but it's crazy because someone might hear something about like human design and rebirthing and go, that's woo woo. That's like,
I've
but
seen from my experience in the working in the medical field to working in holistic health practices like even breath work, I've seen breakthroughs in a way more shorter period of time for way less money versus things that took years and thousands of dollars, including
oh yeah,
insurance, with to even no avail.
right.
And it's absolutely, it in that aspect, it sells itself at least.
I
And
think I, I think so,
yeah,
and I mean, like at the end of the day, the medical system, like much of like the systems in this world right now, it exists to make money. It exists to profit. And so there's nothing to be gained from actually healing people, because we want people on a bunch of drugs. We want
you
them
don't make
going
money
into the
from a
hospital.
healed client
Right.
or a
And for
healed,
me, it's like,
patient.
like I was like, I could do breath work with people forever, but it's like, here's again, I didn't invent rebirthing. Leonard Orr did, and my teacher practices it. He's been doing it for over 20 years. And so to me, it just feels like, okay, here's a thing that we can come. You know how much it costs. You know how many sessions are here. And if you commit to them, like you'll get something out of it. And for me,
Yeah.
like obviously, I mean, I have a day job right now. Like I'm not doing this for profit. I'm doing this because I genuinely
Mhm.
care and I want to help people. And I think that's something that gets lost. I think, especially being like a holistic healer, is that a lot of people just discredit you because you don't have like a license or an MD or anything. Like my dad's a doctor, like but like he takes cancer out of people's bodies. But the fact is, if we lived in a world that was more conscious and cared about holistic health, people wouldn't have cancer.
Yes. Yes.
So it's like I just think a lot of this system is about if it is treating problems, it's problems that are created by the same system, and it's a
Yeah.
revolving door,
It's
right?
a
You get cancer because you're eating the bad food, or you
self-perpetuating,
get
yeah.
obese, and then you end up in the hospital, and it's just
It's a
it's
perfect
just
I mean, I
farming people.
applaud it. It's a perfect system. It's a
Yeah,
perfectly
no, it's like
fucked
it's
up system.
genius. It's very evil. That it's very evil, and it's like, man, like, what does it say about our society that we allowed something as important as medical care to become privatized?
Yeah.
It's just, it's really, to me, it feels very wrong. And I like, yeah, I wish there were more doctors out there who had more like holistic training,
Hmm.
even just training on diet and nutrition, because like a lot of, I mean, that old adage, like you are what you eat. And I
Hmm.
just think so many diseases come from just a poor diet. And then, I mean, again, also, it doesn't help that we live in a culture that's extremely like it's hard to avoid stress, especially if
Hmm.
you're working a 9 to 5 at a corporation with really crazy demands, which is
Yeah.
most companies these days. So
And diets is not just like what we eat, but what we consume,
to consume,
content, what we see, what we gossip,
right?
what we feed our anything we put our energy to. There's yeah.
Exactly. And so, I came out with my first EP earlier this year titled "We're All Doctors Now,"
Oh yeah,
and
Michael's also a
singer
musician and a
songwriter.
comedian, by the way. Michael's a again, he's a Renaissance man himself. I just,
I enjoy many different things. I've never, and this might just be a projector thing. I've just never been able to focus on one thing, so I'm kind of always bouncing between disciplines. And now it's like breath work, it's like healing arts, and then it's writing, and then it's singer-songwriter, and then it's comedy, and then conscious
you're good
comedy.
at it's not like you're like half-ass at a lot of different things. You're like very good at many things. You're
Thank
a
you.
jack of many trades.
I'll take that.
What I love too is like, so you're talking about, and I've seen this. This is, I feel, is a big thing for quote unquote success in these holistic health, new age, whatever fields, is so many people can do Reiki. So many people can do breath work. But what I see is when you can take two things and alchemize or multiple things and alchemize it into a single thing that no one else does. Again, like, you're not the first one to do this kind of rebirthing. You're not the first one to do human design. I mean, you're not even the first one that's done like this mythology, but combining those three amazing things together, that is gold, baby.
Yeah, I don't think there's that you're gonna find many other people doing rebirthing that's also incorporating human design and
Yeah.
mythology. And I mean, the thing is, even like this mythology, Jacques invented this deck, and like he uses these cards, and again, I'm also trained on the tarot. I took his tarot course
Yeah.
as well.
You're
Um,
tr like you again, another sell for Michael. Michael's trained and studied under Jacques for tarot and has like this booklet, these notes, and one of the
oh
most
yes.
fluent tarot readers I know. Like is just like I mean I've seen you. I mean we've been places. You just pulled a card for a random person, and it's just spot on.
Yeah, and again, like even going to festivals last summer, like and again, like you said, just like I think, especially when it comes to divination, synthesis is really
Mm,
important because, like, right, even in like, because a lot of like, Jacques based a lot of this deck like off the system of the tarot. So, like, even in the notes for the classical mythology deck, like, right, all of the Olympians correlate to the different court cards of the tarot. So
mm,
that's always cool too. So it's like if I'm doing like a full tarot reading for someone and then like like a court card comes up, I can say, oh, that also correlates to this. So again, it just it
yeah,
gives the querent more info to like, because again, I know all the info about the tarot, but then when you bring in that mythology, it's like even deeper, even
yeah,
richer. Or if you're doing readings between two decks and exactly, you find these correlations, or you find like the same message coming from two different sources at the same time, that's now even more of like an exclamation mark. Okay, cool. Because someone can, oh, well, okay, there's one thing people, okay, well, it's just a reading, whatever, it's just random, but then coming again, it's like, whoa.
yeah,
So again, it's like I think having these knowledge and being able to synthesize all of these, and especially with the tarot, when it comes to doing readings, to me, like you never want to be someone who's like, especially if you're paying a tarot reader and they're like looking in the tiny booklet. Like I wouldn't like, anyone
yeah,
can do
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Anybody can go and give you a reading and look in the booklet that came with the deck.
yeah.
But like that's why I trained under Jacques' course, which it's not online anymore, which is a shame because it was an amazing course. It was called The Building Blocks of Tarot.
Mm,
And that's why I was interested in it, because I was like, oh, because his whole thing was like, sure, you can go super deep in all these cards, but if you understand just the symbolism, the story of the major arcana, and even the minor arcana, the numerology of it, you're able to now, when you're doing a reading, to quickly synthesize the information, but also to tell a story.
yeah,
You know, and that was like a lot of the practice in that course too. Would be like, okay, take the major arcana, put a bunch of cards down, and now look at it and see what the story is. Like that's something that's even like someone like a friend Kendall could use, any creative could use if you have like a creative block. You can just take these cards down and boom, there's a story being
yeah,
told. And so there's just so many different uses for all of this, even just beyond divination. But for me, it's just, I don't know, it's something that I discovered this stuff through my retreats with Jacques, and it's just like I just the projector in me is like, I want to learn more. I think this is so cool,
yeah.
because especially when Jacques gives readings, it's just like boom boom, and it's like you can see him just,
It's like a
and then
sniper.
it's yeah, and it's just like, but it's always just like he has this way of not only telling the story, but then relating it back to like each person individually. And I know when he started his practice, like 20 odd over 20 years ago, it's like that kind of was his. He started doing tarot, and then he learned rebirthing, and so and kind of counseling, and that he would do like counseling groups and stuff, and
Mm,
then just kept kind of growing his toolkit, which I think every healer, it's like we always have to stay learning and to keep kind of sharpening our skills,
adding
so
more
that
things
we
to the
can
bat belt.
because it's like not everyone who comes to you, like maybe not everybody wants or needs Reiki, but then you're like, okay, well, I'm seeing you're having this, so I can pull this out, and maybe this is what you need. Or like I think you mentioned that too. I think when you were doing like Reiki sessions sometimes with people, you realize like they just really wanted someone to talk
Yeah,
to. And like
like
most
a
of it, that like they'd be like, wow, this was so great. And it's like, okay, well, I didn't even do the Reiki. So it's just interesting. But I think as healers who are kind of more holistic outside of the system, we have to stay learning. We have to just
mm,
exactly. have the what is it, the bat belt?
Yeah, the bat
The
belt.
bat belt. The
Um,
utility belt, whatever it might be.
yeah, man, whatever. Um, you were talking about stories, and
Hmm,
out of fear of this going, or out of concern of this going really long, because I could go. What I mean, I'm sure
sure.
we could both go into this, but you
Yeah.
know, so one, I love how you can go into some of these things. Like when I was over once, you went into this rant about. You don't have to go into this now, because I got another thing I want to bring up that you can go
Sure.
into. But how underrated the Hierophant in the tarot is. And just you had
Mm,
this this like 15 minutes to half hour monologue about how nobody appreciates or how underrated the Hierophant is in the tarot and how people don't even like sometimes remember it as a major arcana. And I thought that was just genius because I've never heard that before. And another
yeah.
thing now, I don't know if if this is something you want to share, if this is something a little bit more black ops, that's, in the making, but you've mentioned, so much of modern storytelling or just storytelling that humans have known is the hero's journey, that is the fool's journey. A lot of the hero's journey starts with the fool card, 0, and goes through the major arcana from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But you mentioned this fascinating idea of the magician's journey. The magician is the card number 1, and it goes backwards from 1 to the fool, 0, and then to the world and backwards or something like that.
Yeah.
Do you care to go into that, or is that something a little bit more?
I mean, I can touch on it a little bit, and again, I can't take credit for that. Again, even the magician's journey was another like a thing that like Jacques has been meditating on, and when we did the breathwork retreat in Bali, it was a 10-day retreat. That was the first time he kind of like unveiled the magician's journey, which to me, I was like, this is blowing my mind. This
Yeah,
is so cool, right? Because right, exactly. The hero's journey, which most people are familiar with, is, right? It's like, or the fool's journey, right? The fool is, the first card in the deck, and we all come into this world as the fool. But the fool is kind of just like ambling along. He's very, I don't know, maybe naive, but just, he's kind of just like bumbling into things. Even like the card is right. He's kind of like wandering off this cliff. Yeah, because he's just kind of like da da da. Um, but the whole thing is the hero's journey is most people I think live their lives as a fool's journey, right? They kind of go through life happen, it's like life happening to them, and they might learn the lessons, they might not. I mean, obviously in like a hero's journey he does, like, right, he goes into the unknown world, he comes back, he's forever changed, and then like he kind of learns the lesson. But very much it's like the hero's journey is very much like life kind of just like happening to you. And this framework that Jacques came up with is the magician's journey, which is kind of going through the major arcana of the tarot in reverse.
mhm,
And so and it's very interesting though, because we often, especially in like popular media, like we don't see the story of the magician. We don't see Gandalf's
yeah,
story. We don't see Merlin's story, right? We see Frodo. Frodo is the fool, or Merlin is with was it like the Knights of the Round Table? Who
yeah.
was that? King Arthur, right?
Arthur.
Yeah, right, Arthur, right? But it's kind of like that same. It is like Lord of the Rings and or Star Wars, and it's
Mhm,
it's all kind of the same story, but we don't see this other one because the magician is someone who he almost does it in reverse. The magician chooses consciously to go into that underworld first,
mhm,
right? And that's hard, and in order to kind of like learn and then to reemerge from that underworld and then like return to the world. And so whereas the fool, like most people are like going along with society, the magician is going against the grain,
yeah,
but he's going against the grain to learn the mysteries, to learn like what's really going on here, to
yeah,
really see the world so that he can also, change his destiny consciously. And so it's the year-long breathwork process, the apprenticeship I'm doing with Jacques is also based on the magician's journey. And that's been cool too, because um, like every month, each of the lectures is like going through, the tarot. And so like I just rewatched session 6 this weekend, and that was like Justice, the Wheel of Fortune, and the Hermit. And that was really interesting because I the hermit, the hermit's about finding our inner light. So like we're igniting our own lantern so that we can see the landscape around us. We become sources for our own lights. And
Mm,
even just like even that right there is like how many people don't do that? They look for that light outside of
mm,
themselves or looking to influencers and all these people instead of being their own influencer. And I'm very much sitting with that hermit energy this week too, because it's like I very much feel like this year, like again, like anytime I work with shock, it ends up being I'm like, as I'm in it, I'm like, what's going on? This is so confusing. This is so hard. And then you got to the end of it and you're like, whoa, that was like really deep and really profound. But even like as I watched that lecture and I got into this hermit energy, and obviously, I did the breath work. And now it's like I made the conscious choice this week. I'm getting rid of my Instagram. I'm getting rid of my Facebook. Even like a few weeks ago, I decided to go vegan. So it's like all of these things are very against the grain. These
mhm,
aren't popular, but they're just choices that I've made because I've seen, kind of like the bird's eye view of what's happening, whether in animal agriculture or social media, and I'm like, no, I don't think I can be a part of this.
mhm,
Even if I am putting like light into this, it's just the nature of this thing is so twisted and most people don't realize it because it's in your pocket every day and yet it's like okay, I want to see what happens when I go without meat, when I go without social media. What am I
mhm,
going to learn when my attention is freed up? Where will my mind wander to?
mhm,
And for me, that's like right now, it's like I read books. I'm reading a lot of books right now because I love to learn. And like right now, I am reading a book about social media and discovering a lot of stuff that I'm like I didn't know about any of this. And man, this is pretty terrifying. And but again, it's like I at the same time, I'm happy there are people out there like you and Reiki Rachel who are on these platforms and are providing like, spiritual guidance and light because the what I found actually in this book that I'm reading that YouTube is actually one of the worst kind of like the algorithms really like it starts with something innocent and then like a few videos later it's promoting conspiracy theories and like hate and all of this stuff that maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but it does this because it knows you're gonna keep watching.
mhm,
And again, so to me, it's like the card that when I think about the world right now, um, and especially when I think about social media, the card that comes up for me in the major arcana is the devil.
mhm,
Because the devil is all about facing the falsehood, but the devil is false.
mhm.
He's a false god, but he's like, or like think of like the phrase, oh, he sold his soul to the devil, right? Oh, his soul sucking job, right?
Yeah,
Most people they describe that as like the corporate world, which I love, especially in the deck that I have, the cosmic tarot. Like
yeah,
the devil is very much he's like in a suit. He very much looks like a CEO, and I think that's like very like that's very poignant for the times that we live in. But it's like,
totally.
but I do like I think humanity right now, if we're looking at the story of the major arcana, which is the story that every soul goes through from birth to death, ideally, right? Not all people make it to enlightenment or the world, right? Or to
Mhm,
self-actualization. Some people get stuck. A lot of people get stuck in judgment or
mhm,
justice. They get stuck in these phases and they kind of stop evolving spiritually. However, I think, right, as above, so below, as within, so without. So, although we're all individually on this major arcana, this story, I think that humanity is as well. And I really do think that the time we're in right now is also the devil card, right? Because we are facing the falsehood. If you look out at the world, there's so many mirrors, and it's kind of like we're in it's like funhouse mirrors. We go, right? Even online, it's like we go and we post and we think that we're just talking to people, but it's getting pushed through this
yeah,
algorithm that nobody like the companies don't tell us about. And I learned from this book, even the companies themselves probably don't even know what these algorithms are anymore because what's training the algorithm? Another algorithm.
mhm,
And so to me, it's like, and maybe you'll agree with this. It's like, I think we have a choice right now. We have a choice do we choose humanity? Do we choose to be human? Do we choose to be real and dive into like
Mm.
spirituality, or do we choose algorithms and like the metaverse
So
and
that's
or
really the big decision for most of us. A lot of people call that like the split or the collapse or whatever. Or like we're just is I'm a huge proponent of choice. We all have a
right,
choice of
free
everything we
will.
do, we say, we think, and all about a choice and how we then choose to create or co-create our reality. And yeah,
But I think you're seeing that right now. You are seeing, like, maybe even in your own fa friends and family, that like there are people who are going into this more, this, machine driven,
artificial.
algorithm driven, scary, archonic, like machine. And then you see people who are kind of like, oh, I want like regenerative farming and I want to get some land
Organic.
and I want to like learn to like relearn how to like live with the earth. And then who is it? There's that guy, that YouTuber After School. I've been watching some of his video. Have you seen that guy? He does like the drawings, and it's like, you know who I'm talking about?
I have heard of him. I do not know. I
Okay,
haven't.
it's like, oh, you should check because a lot of his videos, like he has a whole video too that is like this, and he's like he does talk about that split and like the way he draws it, it's like right, like one way it's like super like spiritual, like, and then the other it's like cameras, and it's like it's really like I'm like, man, this guy gets it, and I didn't realize he was like super spiritual, but I guess he started a podcast and. But just I've seen like some of his episodes recently, and I'm like, oh man, these are wonderful illustrations for like I think spiritually what's going on right now on this planet. So
Mhm.
yeah.
I mean, it's a very, fascinating, incredible time, like in all aspects. And that's why I loved in this time with these decisions, it requires new narratives, new perspectives. As projectors, that's a huge thing we're here to provide, and that's why I also, as someone who's always loved storytelling, as maybe people know on this channel that you've seen, I put out a Visions of 5D or Visions of New Earth series of just new narratives, and that's why I was fascinated with going back to the magician's journey because we
Oh,
haven't seen that, and
oh,
I'd be so fascinated to see that. Because I mean, as much as I've loved the hero's journey, the fool's journey, we can all relate to that. But the magician's journey is just as we, as humanity are evolving consciously, spiritually, there is just there are new thoughts, there are new stories, there are new narratives, there are new ways of thinking being introduced right now. There's and that, but that's also where it can get tricky. There's some other things that could, you know lead us astray or just or trick us, but there's other narratives which are expand or just other ideas, stories, whatever, that are expanding us. And humans, we learn through stories. That's one of our big things. We learn through stories. So I'm super excited about all these new kind of thoughts coming out or just being introduced and being normalized within our society, within our communities, and just stuff like that, just within our consciousness collectively in general.
I agree.
Um,
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like I don't know that the magician's journey is like as sexy as the hero's journey. Like even like just going through this year-long breathwork process, like everything that's that I'm going through, it's like again, it's not, is it sexy to delete your social media? No, because like I think especially we're like hardwired to connect with each other, and especially like the dopamine hits from the likes and the comments and all of that. And it's like to be like I don't want to I'm to live without that. I think that's a choice that a lot of people perhaps wouldn't like. That's the thing, since I announced yesterday, I'm like, hey, I'm deleting all of these on Friday. I've had a lot of people reach out, and like the biggest message I've been getting is good for you. I wish I could
mm,
do that, which is funny because that's a very similar message I get about going vegan. Oh, I don't know how you do that.
mhm,
Good for you. I mean, sometimes people just get angry. Some people are like, fuck you for being vegan because I don't know. People are just very, very, very reactive. But I've never been one to from a very early age. I realized something was wrong with the status quo. So perhaps my whole life has been this magician's journey, and
mhm.
I don't know where it will end, but I'm hoping to find more peace. Because I think that's something that's important as well as a healer. Uh, especially for the work that I do, I have to hold space for people. And then to hold that space so people can release, it's like you have to create space within yourself.
Mm,
So that you have to feel comfortable within your own skin first. And it's like, I finally do feel like through all the work that I've done, especially a lot of the work, with Jacques, but even with like the other therapists I've had in my life, like I've done all this work, so that I can feel okay, so that I can feel good, so that when people come to me and they say, hey, I'm in pain, hey, I have this going on, I can go, tell me what's going on. And so I
mm,
can be present with them. And so I'm not in my own head, or I'm not in my own pain or trauma while someone is telling me about theirs. Because I think that's where, and again, maybe that's my magician, maybe that's my magic,
hmm.
is just
For
creating that
sure.
space for myself, because I just think so many people are so distracted or in pain, and they're not seeking healing. And so it's just they spend their lives actually just projecting their pain onto everyone around them, which just creates more suffering. And just that's just what I've come to, is just I don't want to create more suffering in this world. There's
Right.
already so much out there, and I want to, like, I'm approaching it. I'm approaching life like harm reduction at a festival. You know, like I want to just, hey, you good? I want to be the person that someone comes to and is like, you know, hopefully not like, here's the Narcan. I don't want it to be like that. But I just
Preventative.
preventative, exactly. Preventative care. I want to be someone that people can trust and look to for support, authentic support, and healing. But again, it's like I view myself as a guide. Even breathwork. It's like I'm here to guide you through the breathwork, but you're the one
Yeah.
breathing. You're the one facing all that hard stuff. That perhaps, like, maybe it's stuff that's unconscious, that you don't even know about from childhood, but or maybe it is stuff that, like, you've been scared to look at. And I'm just here to guide you and tell you that it's okay. You can look at that, because that's in my training. That's a big thing we talked about early on, is that when stuff does come back up, whether it's trauma or painful memories or experiences in the breath work, it can feel like it's happening again. And it's important to remember that, like, you're in a safe space.
Hmm.
And that, like, when stuff like when that does come up, it's coming up to be released. And so it's like, I think that's the gift of rebirthing and in choosing to do this work, is that we do this work so that we can have the stuff come up again, and we can kind of face it differently, we can react to it differently, or even just allow it to just
Let it go.
come through. Because perhaps that first time when we experienced that trauma, we didn't want to
Mm,
accept it. We buried it. We ran from it, or we pushed it down. I know in my life, like, I did that with, some trauma from my childhood.
hmm.
And that came up a lot in my breath work, and even, plant medicine experiences. And so for me, it's like, just as I've walked this path, and like I've gone through some very intense healing, that I just hope, like, I mean, to me, like, you can probably tell, is like I'm just like so inspired by Jacques, and
Hmm.
the work that he does. It's so deep, and just he has such a commitment to it, and so much compassion. And especially, like, from a man in 2024, that's like that's
Yeah.
you're not expecting that energy.
That's a
Like,
whole
if I
nother
remember
that's a whole
the,
nother podcast on masculinity. I can
right,
go into and go
right,
create, but
right.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So Michael is again, I can't praise him enough. He has a speaking on masculinity, he's an amazing container of holding space. I have trusted so much of my healing journey experiences with Michael, and if this resonates with you at all, please do yourself a favor and let him guide you. Let him assist you back to your wholeness, your true authentic self, and you'll have fun along the way.
There'll be
um
jokes. There'll
what'd
be
you say?
conscious comedy. I said there'll be jokes. There'll be
Yeah.
conscious comedy.
um so this is the part. you kind of, you kind of gave us a little bit about yourself, where you've come from, a lot of what you offer. This is where I like to go into. Could you give us like a little taste? And it looks like you're already queuing up to draw a card for, I mean, I don't know what the intention is, and maybe you want to do a little breath work too, whatever, or, you know,
Sure. Why don't, yeah, sure. If we're doing a little taste, and again, if you're watching at home, just we'll just do, yeah, we'll just do 20 breaths, so this will be 4 rounds of 5. We'll do one kind of deep breath followed by 4 quicker breaths. So again, Matt, you can join me if you're watching or listening. You can close your eyes. Um, and this first, Matt, we can just take some breaths to connect. So just take some deep breaths in and out, in and out. One more time, in and out to begin. Long deep breath. Just checking in with yourself, breathing normally now. And I'm just gonna shuffle the deck. And and how about this, Matt? This will be a card to just kind of maybe cap off this episode. How about that?
be perfect.
So yeah, so I'm shuffling, and whenever you're ready, Matt, just tell me when to stop.
Stop.
Uh, what a great card.
We got my man.
This is definitely what I needed to hear today. We have Nyx and Erebos. I don't
Ooh.
think I did super well. Um, Sorry, let me get
So
some
this
more.
is an elemental or primordial.
Yeah, this protogonoi. So Nyx and Erebos are the protogonoi of night and darkness. Within the creation, darkness and night are closest in essence to the void. Um, So the divination for this card reflects a metaphorical night phase in your life. Rest to restore your energy. Retreat to find your inner light and truth. A time of darkness and not knowing. Postpone important decisions or actions until you have more information. Be patient. The new day will return and the light of understanding will emerge. Appreciate silence and make space for your imagination and dreams. The dark night of the soul, whereby challenges open new paths of growth. If
Mm.
you are feeling depressed or despondent, step away from your concerns in order to recharge. Things are never as hopeless as they may seem. And the affirmation at the bottom is I withdraw from the world to restore my energy and prepare for a new day. So I definitely am feeling that, especially with getting off of social media. So
At
that
the
very much, yeah.
at the time of this recording, I feel like this is going to be released, weeks later, through time and space. I know that card is super relevant to so many right now. I
Hmm.
feel so many are going through a rebirth, a dark night of the soul, a shadow phase, some kind of transformation in that. So that is perfect. I mean, especially even for myself.
Yeah, I definitely I've been feeling a lot of kind of confusion in my life recently, especially, I mean, I guess for the viewers, like I started this year, I was building a business online and spent a lot of money on coaching and it didn't work out. And so since it didn't work out, I had to get a job and it's just it definitely isn't the way that I thought this year would go, but I think when I look back at this year, especially like even the choice how I worked with those coaches, it really wasn't in alignment with my strategy as a projector. It wasn't an invitation. It was I think I was trying to force it. And I think as
Mm.
projectors, when we try to make things happen or force it, it never really works out. And
Yeah.
so that's where I'm at right now. I'm kind of reviewing what went right this year, what went wrong.
Mm.
um but again, I think it's culminated in me taking a step back from it all. And it's funny, just throughout all of this, as I was doing that, I was also like, this was separate from my kind of my breath work, my healing practice, that kind of emerged as I was doing this. And then I realized months in, I was like, I think I'm preferring this feels more impactful than this.
Yeah.
This feels more not as aligned, and I just kept trying to make it work because I
Yeah.
gave I gave people a lot of money, and I said, well, they're experts, they know what they're doing. And be careful, viewers.
Again, use your own discernment,
Use your
of,
own discernment,
you
always use your own discernment whenever working really with anybody for anything.
yeah.
Yeah.
You are the end all be all for your life.
Right.
Um,
And it's okay to rest. It's okay, especially if things are hard, if things aren't making sense, take a step back. That's what this card is all about. And honestly, I'm very much I'm looking forward to this next phase of my life and being off social media, because even this week I've had several moments where I've like picked up my phone and I'm like, you have that like
yeah,
unconscious pull, and I'm like, I want that gone. I want to have a day where I wake up and like in my world I've like forgotten that social media is
yeah,
even a thing.
very present. I mean, I can't
Yeah,
tell you how many times I've like closed out of
and then you
an
just
app,
reopen
and
it,
then
right?
I just like, yeah, it's
We're like lab rats. We're like Which is we're like it's funny though, even in the book I was reading, there was like a researcher who was like, "Oh my God, like this social media stuff is like I feel like I like," and she's like a researcher, and she's like, "I feel like my lab rats that are like drinking cocaine."
yeah, wow,
And it is that addicting. So,
yeah,
again, I feel like I'm going, this is my digital Henry David Thoreau phase. This is my digital Walden Pond. It's like he went to Walden to discover like what is life about without society. And for me, I'm like, what's life without social media? I'm gonna find out. And I
crazy.
think it'll be a lot more peaceful. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I'm excited for you, my boy.
Thank you.
Um, so thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Michael, for sharing yourself, your gifts, your medicine, just where you've come from, your experience, what you offer. Yeah, thank you so much for being on here. It's truly a
Thank you
pleasure and
for
honor.
having me, man. This has been such a joy.
Yeah,
I love talking to you, and I love talking about all of this stuff.
that's why we're here, man. That's why we're here. The work is
Yeah.
the joy, and the joy is the work. So,
Mm.
for the kiddies at home who would want to work with you one on one, book a session, how the hell can we find you?
Sure. Yeah, you can go to my website, www.michaelboothbycreative.com. Haven't updated the blog recently, but there's a few articles up there that I wrote earlier this year. But I've got, I think up there right now, I just have my tarot. I have my like a tarot reading, and then my rebirthing. But feel free, like I have a contact form on there that also is like, again, if you're interested in maybe like an archetype reading or anything, you
Mhm.
can kind of like check. You can send me a very personal message, and I'll reach out. Because everyone I work with, especially people who I don't know, I love to at least just like hop on a call with you just to meet you and see where you're at and see kind of which of my offerings would be best for you. So yeah, head to my website. Or yeah, shoot me an email, Michael at michaelboothbycreative.com, which I think that should be on the website as well. Either way, it'll come to my email. I check my email every day.
We'll link that stuff below. We'll link your email and
Cool.
stuff below. So yeah,
Yeah.
for anyone all over the world who resonates, reach out to Michael, say hi. He's a friendly face, and he'll do you good. 5 out of
Oh,
5 stars, I recommend.
oh. Thanks, man. Thanks so much
Absolutely,
for
my
having
boy.
me.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for being here. And we'll talk to you next time. MC Warrior the Light out.